Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Normally I am posting no commentary gameplay. I have been posting some commentary gameplay here, so if you want to check those out, I'll link those here for you. I also do commentary content, as in movie recaps and summaries, and also doing character lores for the Outlast universe, and also other games as well, but I haven't branched off to other video games yet. But I've been mainly doing the Outlast Trials, Outlast Whistleblower, and eventually I will dive into Outlast 2. Today's video, we will be covering the one, the only, the bald-headed big boy that SZA be talking about in that one song, Chris Walker. So stick around if you enjoy my content. Today we'll be talking about Chris Walker's physical appearance, his personality, and also his background story that even I didn't know about until I read those Outlast comics. So if you enjoy my content, give me a huge thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and we're going to dive into who exactly is Chris Walker.
I shall deliver your punishment.
Suckers, you think you can break me like that? With an animal carcass?
Is that you, Sweet Pea?
You should have turned down this bounty, Talos.
I'll see you soon.
Little pig.
Starting this video off, we're going to dive into Chris Walker's physical appearance within the game Outlast. You come across Chris Walker when you first start playing the game, so after you enter the asylum and you go through everything, when you go through those bookcases, when you're going to the next area, Chris Walker comes out and he grabs you, calls you little pig, and throws you down on the first floor. However, during that time, if you can catch it, you can kind of see what he looks like. So he is an overweight and extremely muscular individual. He has no shirt on, he has inmate pants like all the other inmates within the asylum, and he wears tan combat boots. When you get a closer look at him, you'll see that he is bloated, he has massive arms and legs, which makes him massively powerful. Now, prior to him being committed to the asylum, Chris Walker was not always bald. Chris Walker had short hair, and he had a Murkoff security uniform. He had the light blue police shirt, black pants, matching shoes, tie, and the duty belt. He also had a security patch on his sleeve and a watch on his right wrist, and then eventually he ended up fighting with the other Murkoff agent. Now, during a fight with the Murkoff agents, Mr. Walker was shot several times, and one of the bullets ended up piercing his cheeks and leaving him with a number of scars. Now, with that being said, he was also exposed to the morphogenic engine, which during his treatment, he developed this anxiety regarding his flesh, and he eventually started tearing his skin from his lips and his nose. Eventually, he started ripping skin from his forehead in order to achieve truer vision. That's just wild for me to say, because it just makes me think that he was doing that because he was trying to find his third eye. To prevent Walker from self-harming himself anymore, they decided to restrain him with sizable chains that strapped around his arms and legs. And as I mentioned earlier, this guy is massive. He's bloated, got massive arms and also legs. They had to use big chains in order to accommodate for his large size and also his impressive strength, because I did mention earlier that he's extremely muscular. Now, whenever you know Chris Walker is nearby, you always hear chains rattling around. All those chains was attached to him due to the self-harming that he was doing because of the morphogenic engine. When you get a closer look at him, you'll notice that he wears a strap that merges into his skin on the side of his head, and this pulls his lips and cheeks apart. Let's talk about Mr. Walker's personality. So he comes off, in my opinion, pretty insane because he is collecting heads and other body parts. You come across him when you're in the prison ward. When you see him in the prison ward, he's ripping off somebody's head. And then on top of that, you come across him again in the prison ward where there's a pile of bodies and he just jumps on top of it, and then he's looking for you again. So to me, he comes off pretty insane. Now, he does have a military background, but we'll talk about that when I talk about his background story. However, being tied to the military military background. I believe that is where his obsession is from security protocol, and he'll go on mass murderous tracks because he thinks what he's doing is for the greater good. Now, he has a whole fixation because of containment, and that's also possibly an origin from his military background. However, I think that's more so just related to he wants to kill everyone and anyone in sight because he does not want the wall rider to possess anyone because he doesn't want the wall rider to have a host. Now, despite all of that, even his violent behavior and some of his crazy dialogue, sometimes you may catch him in dialogue where he is somewhat calm, and I'm using calm, level-headed very, very loosely because at the end of the day, he wants to defeat the wall rider before it reaches the local town, and he's telling Miles that he only wants to help. However, you're chasing after Miles and you want to rip off his head. Now we're going to dive into this backstory of who is Chris Walker. Now, bear with me during this portion. It did take me a minute to get all this information because I went to different sources, including the official website of Red Barrels, to go read the comics to see if I can find any additional information regarding Chris Walker's background. I do want to note that I have looked at the comics from the Outlast era and then also the Outlast Trials era as well. So if you would like for me to do a future video where I'm doing a summary on the comics, I mean, I will be more than welcome to do so. Just comment it down below. When you're going through the asylum, eventually you come across either a documentation or I believe it's a note that Miles ends up writing. I can't remember which one. I will have to search it and I'll put it on the screen here. However, in that note, it reveals that Chris Walker, before he was admitted into Mount Massive Asylum, he was an ex-military police guy and he has toured Afghanistan several times. Now, prior to him being admitted to Mount Massive, his career started off as a military policeman in United States Army, and he was an Iraq war veteran. After he returned from Afghanistan, him and his other war veterans were committed to Spindletop Psychotherapy Clinic in Hatton, Texas. The reason for this is because they recently developed PTSD. Now, during their treatment there, they got dream therapy. They also got guided hypnosis, and this was supposed to help them release their trauma. Eventually, during that time there, Mr. Walker decided to become a Murkoff employee. I mean, I don't know why anybody would want to be an employee for Murkoff, but go off, I guess. And he worked as a surveillance officer at Spindletop to survey the therapy session. During his time there, a doctor named Claymore was stating that he was including Arabic culture into the therapy sessions, and this was his way to show his soldiers that Christian and Islam myths originated in the same place in order for them to overcome their trauma. Now, that whole method warped their psyche. It left them being delusional of the demigods in their heads. And one of the demigods was Apollo. I think I pronounced that correctly. I don't think I did. If I didn't, just let me know. But that was the delusion that they were seeing. And eventually they were all killed, and it was referring to that demigod. Now, this may have triggered something in Walker to, one, start his murders there, and then it migrated to the asylum when he got admitted. The reason why I say that is because at some point during this session, Walker's psyche broke, and it led to him killing 3 of his inmates, including John, Martin, and also Priscilla. These were war veterans. When they discovered their bodies, they were torn apart. They was missing their head, and it led to people believing that whoever was the killer kept their heads as trophies. As I mentioned earlier, Chris Walker likes to collect heads and other body parts, so it wouldn't surprise me if he kept them and that was his trophy. And during that time, Walker was well aware of his actions, although his main reasons for killing those 3 remains unclear. And I'm still looking that up. I might put a little edit here somewhere to advise that I found some additional information. But so far, him killing those 3 people is unclear. But I blame Claymore because I feel like with him introducing that really messed up a lot of things. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Chris Walker got into an altercation with 2 Murkoff agents. This is where this happened. Now, I also mentioned a little bit earlier about the comics on the Red Barrels official website. All of this entire scene that I'm about to tell you is in the official comics. Like, this is what goes down before Chris Walker gets admitted into Mount Massive Asylum. So, as I mentioned earlier, he murdered 3 people. He murdered John, Martin, and Priscilla, but their heads were missing. Pauline and Paul are the 2 Murkoff agents that is leading an investigation, but they don't want to involve the police. Obviously not, because you see the things that Murkoff does. Who would want to involve the police with the illegal things that they would be doing? Now, during this time, Walker is misleading them throughout the entire investigations. Like, he's cooperating and he's being very positive about everything about the victim. But at some point, they realize that he's lying and he's covering up the fact that he's the killer. And they find this out because Claymore dies. They found Claymore in the therapy room. So when they found him, they was like, okay, well, there are cameras in here, so we can review the camera footage in the security room. Only 2 people have access to that security room, Walker and Claymore. And when they walked in there, they noticed that the cameras are destroyed. Like, all the equipment in the control room is destroyed, so they have no footage to review. However, Claymore is dead. The only other person who has access is Walker. Therefore, Walker is the one responsible. So fast forward, they go to his home, but they realize that he isn't home. However, there are 4 cooler boxes, and in 3 of them, they found heads of the previous victim, John, Martin, and Priscilla. So they decided to wait until Chris Walker comes home to confront him. And while they're searching his home, they found his childhood toy, which is a stuffed toy pig. So this toy pig stems from Little Pig that he says in the game. I believe that is what it stems from. If not, let me know, but I'm putting 2 to 2 together. I think that's what Little Pig comes from. Now, shortly after, Chris Walker finally arrives home with the head of Dr. Claymore, and they draw their guns, as in they, Paul and Pauline. They draw his gun and they advise him to stand down. Now, during this time, one of them was holding his stuffed animal and he lashes out. I think it was Pauline that he lashed out on first, and he threw her on the ground, and then he grabbed Paul by the throat. Pauline shoots him several times in the face, and that is where the scar comes from. However, he drops Paul and he attacks Pauline by throwing her out of the window. And before he can deliver the final blow on her, Paul grabs his gun and shot Chris several times, only for him to knock the gun out of his hand and throw him to the ground. So y'all may have wanted to include the police at this point, but y'all didn't. But still, y'all should have, I don't know, called for additional backup. It doesn't have to be police. It could be other Murkoff agent. But eventually they get him down and unconscious because Pauline gets in the car and drives it at him, and she throws him against a rock. Now, this is a portion of the story that pisses me off a little bit because, I mean, I get it. Chris Walker, he did get apprehended by the 2 agents. However, since he was a Murkoff employee, instead of holding him accountable for what happened, they blamed everything on another patient. That other patient, I believe his name was Omar. Y'all, again, you won't know who Omar is unless you read the Outlast comics, but Omar was the one who they blamed everything on for the killings, and he's the one that received a life sentence in prison. However, Walker was not surrendered to the police at all. Like, even though they have all the evidence in the world to have him in jail for life and/or have a death sentence, they decided to admit him into Mount Massive Asylum for experimentation. And 2 months later after that, Pauline was called to the asylum because of Jeremy. And we all know who Jeremy is. And if you like Jeremy, I don't know. Because I don't like Jeremy because I wanted to beat him up. However, she met with Jeremy in the underground lab, and he was showing her Chris Walker. This is also in the comic. I believe this portion is in the Outlast. What is it? It's not the Outlast Trials. It's called, let me look at it for y'all. The Murkoff, okay, it's called Outlast, the Murkoff account. So the whole fight scene is in issue 1. The whole scene where Pauline is meeting up with Jeremy to look at Chris Walker, that's in issue 2. And when she saw Chris Walker, she did not recognize that man at all. He wasn't human anymore. And at this point, he has turned into a monster. And it's crazy to see what the Mount Massive Asylum did to him. Granted, he was already going down a psychotic path after he did the whole psychotherapy sessions with Dr. Claymore. But I just feel like with him going to Mount Massive Asylum, it just amplified it. And that is the whole background that I have on Chris Walker. Everything else that happens with Chris Walker, we experience it within the Outlast and also Outlast Whistleblower. In Outlast, he is following around Miles in order to kill him to avoid the wall rider to have a new host, and eventually he does end up dying in the very last portion of the game. When you get to the underground lab, he basically cuts you off, but the wall rider kills him and he shreds him in pieces by putting him through an air grate. However, in Outlast Whistleblower, I believe he only shows up once or possibly twice. I think he shows up at one point because Jeremy, I think he pops up twice. Jeremy ends up wrecking the radio in that room because you're trying to contact the outside world technically, and Jeremy comes in and smash it. Chris Walker comes in then, and then you have to run from Chris Walker, and then Chris Walker shows up again whenever you are on the portion where Father Martin is writing on the wall down the drain, and you go past that part, and Chris Walker is in the area where two of the security guards are saying, oh no, he's not even human anymore, and they're referring to Chris Walker, and they block it, and you have to run from Chris Walker then. Those are the only two times that he ever shows up. And this is all that I have for today's video. I know I typically end the video with some random trivia about the different Outlast characters. However, I feel like Chris Walker doesn't have any trivia to present to everyone. Whenever it comes to the trivia about Chris Walker, it's not about him, but more so about his character within the game. For example, they may talk about how if you walk out of a certain area that he's stalking at a certain amount of time, there's like a weird glitch where he won't approach you, or he may despawn. There's also another trivia on here that talks about in the first demo he seems different than the final version, and I just feel like that's not necessarily true trivia about Chris Walker's character himself compared to maybe Eddie Glutskin, where I talk about how in the trivia that song that he sings is an actual song, or how I also mentioned in Blueskin's notes, they reference him to be like Bluebeard because he's known for murdering 6 previous wives, and with Eddie Glutskin, he's murdered multiple women before he was admitted into the asylum, and then he mutilated men to make them women, and then he'll hop up and murder them as well. So I just don't think Chris Walker has anything like that. It's not like, I mean, I guess the only trivia I can think of is him popping up in the Outlast, not the Outlast, but in Outlast Whistleblower, but there isn't a lot of trivia to offer regarding Chris Walker. However, if you did enjoy my content, give me a huge thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, comment down below who's your favorite Outlast antagonist within the Outlast universe. Did you know all of this about Chris Walker? Did you know about the comics within the Outlast universe? And also comment down below if you would like for me to do like a summarization of the comics, because as I mentioned, they are on the official Red Barrel's website, and I'll be more than glad to do a summary of all of the comics from Outlast to the Outlast trials. So if that is something that you're interested in, comment it down below and I can also work on that as well. But until then, I'll see you next time.
This is a little extra.